Ozzie Jurek joins me back on the line with us. Ozzie, I want to talk about one aspect here. One of the things that's sort of a fundamental of economics is about incentives. And one of the things when you raise taxes, it's another way of saying, I want less of this. Well, in British Columbia, they raised taxes, especially aiming the Vancouver market. It was Vancouver, Greater Vancouver, for foreign owners. They added a 15% tax that went into effect last August. And in other words, they're saying we want less foreign ownership. But one of the things we said would happen out of that is money will simply go elsewhere. And one of the places that has certainly been a beneficiary has been Toronto. Now there's talk about putting a foreign buyer's tax in Toronto.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, Mike, is that, they said last year, in fact, the Housing Minister, Charles Sousa, said that Ontario would not follow BC's lead, and instead they raised the taxes on houses over $2 million. But since then, prices are up 28% on single-family homes, and Ontario is feeling pressure. And guess what? Now he likely will bring in the tax.
Yeah, it is interesting that they did say a year ago that they wouldn't, but now they're getting this. What are those prices are up, 25% in the last year or something, if it's a single detached?
Yeah, that's right. It's 28%. It's huge. So the average price is north of $1.5 million, and that caught up to Vancouver pretty quickly.
Just to be clear, where are they talking applying this? Is it Toronto proper, or is it the bigger area? What?
Well, Ontario is actually looking at it to go the whole Golden Horseshoe south of Toronto, maybe as far as Hamilton, where home prices have also spiked. So we think the foreign tax is going to be in place within weeks. And you and I talked about it last August. The foreign buyer, what's he going to do? Seattle, Whistler, Toronto are certainly in play. So.
It is fascinating, though, eh? I mean, we seem to be conflicted about our attitudes about foreigners. If we call it immigration or refugees, we seem to be at least, majority of the population keener on that. But are we saying just don't buy a home? And I know that's dangerous to get into, wade into that water, but it is interesting to see that because there was a big outcry going back a couple of years when Chinese companies, for example, were buying different companies in the oil patch. And yet at the same time, once, for example, the Liberals have come in power, the federal Liberals, they've been looking to attract some Chinese investment. I mean, it's just very interesting what's going on here.
Well, and the key, of course, is, I mentioned it at my land rush last week, and we've talked about it before. I believe firmly we are in the most unreported inflation of hard assets of all times. I mean, 3 years ago, you and I talked about when I was in London or Dublin or Berlin, I mean, prices were going up everywhere, and then the money is looking for some safe haven. And it's getting so bad that some other countries really zap it to the foreign buyer. I mean, Hong Kong has now a 30% tax, and Australia really is taking the gloves off.
Yeah, Australia is an interesting case because when they were talking about doing it in Vancouver, I was well familiar with what had happened in Australia, but it had been ineffective, at that point. When they first put it in, it was that you could be a foreign owner of brand new buildings, in other words, to encourage construction, but not existing homes, but it didn't work. Now I hear that Australia is getting even tougher when it talks about enforcement, though.
Well, and they're doing it. They're taking the gloves off. Like the Chinese government says, thou shalt not take any money out of China, and they seem to mean it. And they have now a foreign investment review board, and you have to get approval before you can buy a resale home. You can buy an unoccupied new home, but only if you get approval. But the key and the kicker to me is that in the last little while, the Australian government has really zapped them. Under the new rules, the people get a fine of $100,000 Canadian, up to 3 years in jail. Companies, almost $500,000, and real estate agents who help a foreigner breach the rules can be fined up to $42,000. And so that is taking the gloves off. And in fact, they have forced the sale of houses, over 61 houses that they have actually forced people to buy, to sell, that had bought them by circumventing the rules.
It is interesting because it's one thing to have a rule, it's another to be able to enforce it. And I know in the first go-round, they were having real trouble enforcing it. But, I mean, when you look at Sydney, Hong Kong's the only more expensive place on earth?
Yeah, actually they're number two as far as demography report is that they're number two most expensive. And when you consider the 61 homes that they forced the sale of, I don't know how you would do that under Canadian law, but that was a value of 100 million Canadian. And the most expensive divestment was a $6 million house near Melbourne, which was owned by an Indian national, right? It's not just Chinese money, just like we have Iranian money, and it's the world's rich are looking for a safe place to put money.
Well, I might say, though, the last thing I saw, and it's probably a year ago, that Canadians were the second biggest foreign buyers down in Australia. Canadians forget that we're the largest buyers in the U.S. by unit, not necessarily by money, but by unit, and we were second in Australia. So let's not forget the Canadians are out there, too.
Oh, yeah, in the U.S., we had you go to anywhere, whether it's Phoenix or, our favorite places for going in the sun, we are a major player in the United States.
Yeah, I was going to say, if the U.S. starts adopting this attitude, you better be careful, Ozzie. Your face is going to be on a wanted poster because you've done awfully well for your investors down in Phoenix since 2011. You got both the Canadian dollar drop, so you got the U.S. dollar rise by owning the property, and, of course, the real estate's moved, too. Hey, one more thing very quickly, Ozzie. Just give me a sample of the kind of fine if people get penalty.
Well, the fine is substantial. Like, it's almost 100,000 U.S., for an
That's
individual.
In Australia, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, in Australia. It's about 500,000 for a company, and as a realtor, $42,000 U.S. or $212,000 to the company. So they mean business. So they're really, the key to me is that they actually sold 61 houses. It's not just a threat. They're saying this is what's going to happen to you. That will kill the market. That'll make the foreign investors think twice. So the double whammy, Chinese cannot take money out of China anymore. Australia is tightening the rules. Several countries in Europe are thinking about it. Ontario is thinking about it. And this morning, guess what, Mike? The mayor of Victoria said they might want to follow Ontario.
Well, I hope they all get some data first. That would be a good one. And look, we got to go here, but I want to tell people that last week at the Land Rush, there was 100 properties under $100,000. So I'm going to, Ozzie, you don't even know about this. I want to let our audience know. If you send an email to Max Jurok, to go to max@jurok.com, max@jurok.com. He'll send you back the PDF of all 100 properties that were available at the conference under $100,000. So that's max@jurok.com. Ozzie, I hope I didn't just ruin your weekend by making that offer, but thanks for joining us.
Thanks for being there. I'm heading skiing.